Hello, everyone. Welcome to Project 3810 Munch and Learn. Today's session we are calling Incubate Your Wellness. And we have a panel of people from various aspects of our mental health wellness lanes of life. So we have Stacy Hansen with Stacy Cares. We have Nolan Rogers, our storytelling alchemist. We have Christina Walker with New View Therapy. We are going to first have them all introduce themselves and tell a little bit about what they do, and then we'll have question and answers. So let's get it started, Stacy.
All right. I'm going to step in front of you and not on your mic. And could you hand me my clicker? Because there you go. All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? All right. As Vicki said, I am Stacy Hansen, and I am with Stacy Cares Oklahoma, LLC. That is my company. I am a board-certified patient advocate and also a certified end-of-life doula, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what those things are. My company was founded in 2019, kind of right before everything went COVID. So I feel like even though I started in 19, I feel like I've only been in business about 2 years. My company offers information, guidance, logistical, and emotional support to people trying to navigate their healthcare or end-of-life situations. And this is for patients, their families, or people who are in their caregiver role for a loved one or friend. My focus is on elderly, mostly residents that are in long-term care facilities, assisted living, or find themselves in a hospital room kind of needing assistance talking with their providers. I do phone consultations. I go to appointments, medical appointments. If any of you have tried to get a word in edgewise sometimes at a doctor's appointment, that can be challenging. And so one of the things that I do is help people prepare for those appointments, go in, make sure I'm taking notes, and then if they've told me there's really something they want to make sure that that doctor hears during that appointment, then I'm that one that's like, whoa, wait, don't walk out the door yet. So helping people get their questions asked and hopefully get the answers from their providers that they're seeking. And well-being visits. So I also visit people in facilities. Not everybody has family that lives in the same state, right? And people end up in a care facility, just living their life, but the rest of their family be in another state. So I'm able to be those eyes and ears for that person at that place, and then helping their families kind of stay aware of what they need. And this is a fee-for-service business that is not covered by health insurance, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the questions time. So true or false? The job of an advocate is to make decisions for clients. And of course, I already gave away the answer because I forgot to make it do that little fancy slide-in thing. So what's the answer, true or false? False, right. Advocates must not make decisions for the people that they are helping. The job of an advocate is to provide guidance and help people find the resources and information that they need to make their own informed decisions and choices about what they're trying to achieve in their health care. And so this company, this service is needed because people need help. Navigating healthcare at any age can be really, really stressful for caregivers trying to help somebody else or for the patients themselves. My niche is communication. It's really, everything I've said so far, right, ties back to communication. Going to those appointments, helping people talk with their doctors, helping relay information to families, from patients, from clients. It's all about effective communication. And in healthcare, if you don't have that, then dangerous situations can come up. You can imagine scenarios related to medications and procedures and things like that. So we're really trying to assure safety and just quality of life, really. So yes, the best care outcomes, quality of life for people, And then, the other side is advocacy in people who are dying also, right? That's a process, just like trying to live with a quality of life. There is a way to die and go through that process while trying to assure that you have the best quality of life during that process too. And hospice is there for that, but only a little bit in the home. And so often people need more support in that, and I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But basically, our healthcare system could be better. And so any help that you can have from someone who's had experience helping others or navigating it can really be helpful. So how does one become an advocate and a doula? Well, I don't know how to explain it any more than these pictures. The woman in the top right was my ballet teacher when I was 3. She was also an LPN and a nursing home administrator, and she would take us to different facilities, and we would put on our little ballet performances. And I saw people that were 10 years old in wheelchairs that couldn't walk. And I saw, elderly people, and I guess I became sensitized instead of afraid, right, at a young age, that there were people that were different from me. And as I grew up, I just wasn't bothered by it. I wasn't intimidated by it. It didn't scare me. I was sensitized. And so I date my advocacy heart all the way back to when I was 3. The next picture is my grandfather. He had cancer for much of my teenage years. This picture is actually taken on his birthday in February 1992. He died the following month. So this is really almost an end-of-life picture of him. Growing up watching my grandmother take care of him, and through his illness, again, had a sensitizing effect on me, and I watched my grandmother care for him. That's her in the next picture. That's my grandmother. I started helping her with her health care in 2006. She died in 2020. Lots of hospitalizations through her 80s and 90s. She died at age 98. The next one there is my mom. She died last year. I helped care for her from 2007 up until her death. Lots of medical management, lots of hospitalizations, nursing home visits. The last slide is my dad. He has developed dementia. And so helping take care of him, helping make sure that he has a quality of life and a safe living situation are all things that I'm doing in my life and have done in a certain way for many, many years. That is what made me an advocate, but everybody's background that they bring to their job, as you all know, it makes us who we are. That's what made me who I am. Just wanted to share a little bit of that. So credentials give cred. Okay, so I have some personal experience, but what else? Well, as you've just heard, I've been a private patient advocate for 16 years, professional advocate for 4 years. I did get a certification, passed a hard test to become board certified patient advocate by the Patient Advocate Certification Board. I had training and certified end-of-life doula, got certified there. And I do have some college degrees. But really, other than just helping me be a really well-rounded, overeducated person, I wouldn't say that those have played a lot into my work right now. 5 years in medical offices while I was in college, and then I was also an environmental advocate for 30 plus years, so I've always just kind of had that advocate tendency. So just wanted to speak a little bit, don't want to run too long here, but speak to a little bit more about what is a doula. Most people associate doulas with birth, right? Birth doulas. Doula is a Greek word that means non-medical person that gives physical, emotional, and a spiritual support to someone else. So as you can see, you could probably apply that word doula to a number of different areas in life. In this case, it's applied to helping people going through the process of dying. Non-medical professional is what an end-of-life doula is. We do not practice medicine. Even if you're a doctor or a nurse and you become a doula, if you're a doula, you're not a medical practitioner. And your insurance company will want to help make sure of that too. You're covered for this or you're covered for that. So you can't do it all, and you shouldn't. So we provide holistic support for the dying and their loved ones before, during, and after death. In my case, we're trained in the various life stages, starting to recognize what's coming, when, and being able to talk with families about that, and helping them understand the natural processes to provide comfort and support. And of course, this is needed. There is hospice. Many people, especially that have Medicare, go on hospice. But hospice staff time in homes is very limited. Most people come into hospice late. They could be, it's allowed for 6 months, but many people will come in a week, 2 weeks, a few days, and their caregivers or families are left trying to manage this whole process, right? And they don't know how. So they're trying to get educated and keep up with the changes and everything, and so it can be difficult. And a doula can help with that. So it's, because it's difficult for families to learn these skills quickly. So in the end, really, most families aren't prepared to do these types of things at home. It ends up being rushed and stressful, and the doula, in my case, we can help ease that stress. So that's a quick overview of being an advocate, being a death doula, and here's my contact information for anyone who would like to write it down. And I look forward to answering your questions after the rest of the panel presents. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Nolan.
All right. So here's me. My name is Nolan Clay Rogers. I am a local budding metaphysical entrepreneur that is trying to bring back into vogue a number of tools that we've forgotten about for however many hundreds of years that they've been lost. A lot of people, specifically within the entrepreneurial space, will get very focused on concrete material needs, goods, services. And so what I try to provide is only the things that have helped me in my own life moving forward. Because I know, like a lot of us, we haven't necessarily had the best mentors or guidance. We've gone down many different paths that we're either told were the best option for us, only to find out that they weren't. And the more that I leaned into specific tools that simplified my own thought processes around the life I want to live, I learned that I need to be able to provide those same tools for everybody else. So I'm currently working on providing different services around tarot reading, astrology, geomancy, runes, all of these old tools that have been around for however many thousands of years that all link back to the same fundamental human skill of storytelling. Now, I can only attribute a lot of the good things in my life to the fact of I had people who would ask me before bed, what do you want to hear a story about? And that imparted a specific type of skill set that allows you to, one, not only deal with your own internal emotions and state of being, but also make sense of the chaos that's going around you. Because the story structure is going to be the same no matter if it was 10,000 years ago or if it's something you're streaming on your phone today. And I want to provide those tool sets again. So when someone comes to me for a session, be that a tarot reading, an astrology reading, I pick a tool, say tarot cards. And I use the same method in any practical matter. So today, I drew 5 cards for what needs to be spoken about in this panel from my perspective. And in those 5 cards, it spoke about how most of us are fighting the same battles over and over again. And how we forget that there's a wealth of information within the human unconscious that can leverage anything that we are currently facing for our own benefit. Now, I say this because whenever we look back at research or other experts and scholars in the field of storytelling, Bruno Bettelheim in particular is one, who spoke about in his book, The Uses of Enchantment, the fact of children were more psychologically healthy whenever they were told the old fairy tales, talking Brothers Grimm and back. Whereas a child that was told, say, just the little engine that could, was not able to easily deal with and cope with the trials and tribulations of modern life. Now, there was this trend over the course of history of modernizing the stories that we tell. But the unfortunate thing that we've lost, and that I've tried to implement with my own daughter, who's about 15 months old now, is to make sure that I impart those older stories. Because we keep fighting the same battles over and over again when humanity for 10,000 years or so has a continuous line of symbols and experience that can be drawn from, that whenever we stop looking at it as a child's thing or something that can only be useful in our childhood, when in adulthood we realize that we have to do all this work to heal that inner child, we need to start telling those stories again and learning how to tell our own stories. So for example, I like a journaling practice as well. And a lot of the times my clients need to be reminded of their own need to author their own lives. And whenever we also look at studies of how humans, whenever they are going through college or making large life decisions, just journaling and authoring what your life has been up to this point can get you anywhere from 30 to 50% increased likelihood of succeeding at the goals that you put down for yourself. So whether it is playing an old game of cards, or whether it is making some random dots in the sand, or thinking about what's happened during the day and just telling a meaningful, almost presentation of what's going on in your life will get you above chance outcomes. And so what I try to provide anymore as a certified minister since 2012 for interfaith studies and spiritual needs of people in my own private life, as a once criminal justice major turned neuroscience major in college, to a certified practicing hypnotist under the National Guild of Hypnotists, to a certified permaculture designer, is that we need to look at the total environment that we live in and start telling the story of not only our own personal character, but the characters all around us. And that can have wide-reaching effects depending upon what you focus on, the questions that you ask, and what symbols you are feeding yourself. So I like to tell people that have never heard of tarot readings or astrology, or they have their own preconceptions about these things, of what would it mean to you to, in 15 minutes, have a personalized special, a story just for you about whatever is nagging in the back of your head that hasn't been solved yet. What would it mean in the next 15 minutes to iterate on a different solution, rather than spending an entire weekend trying to decompress and mull over the issues or emotions surrounding a given issue? I want to be able to teach people how to do that for themselves. So rather than being told the stories that are presented to us by the entertainment industry and the religious industry itself, what would happen if you made your own Bible? What would happen if you told your own epic where you were the hero? What does that mean for you? And that's what I try to provide.
Thanks, Nolan. All right, Christina.
My name is Christina Walker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I started my own company, New Therapy, because in the hospital setting, it was more about money than patient care, and that doesn't fit my personal code of ethics or my professional code of ethics. So what I do now is I do mostly individual therapy with depression, anxiety, and trauma. I like to do trauma. It's kind of a thing that I focus on. So I've got some different certifications in that as psychotherapist. But to pull therapy into entrepreneurship, I think any of us would say there's big battles that you have to jump to start your own companies. And so some of those therapeutic exercises have been very helpful for me of take the leap of faith. You never know what's on the other side and things like that. But I think that that's enough introducing, and I'd rather do questions.
All right, then. I'm going to start with you, because you tell us why you got into it, like a little bit of background.
I have one story that really sticks out. Well, actually two. So when I moved from Kansas and I went to school in Oklahoma, I was saying I wanted to be a school counselor. My professor was a licensed clinical social worker, and she's like, try these classes. And school wasn't the easiest thing for me, so I tried the classes. I was like, oh, I'm getting A's, and that's not hard. So that's where it kind of got me into before this hospital was like, okay, you have to discharge her. And the client was in front of me. I said, okay, we're moving forward to discharge. And this person just broke down. And I said, okay, we're going to bend the rules. You're not leaving. Keep coming. And I'm just not going to bill you. So just come in. And that's the point that I said, like, this isn't right for me. Like, I have to save lives, not hurt lives. And so with that setting, it was almost like you have to do this even though you know your client's not ready. And so that's why I really branched out on my own, because I got in this field to save lives, not to hurt them.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I'll start the questions off, but you guys be thinking of questions that you have as well. All right, so the first question I would like each of you to answer is, in your specific lane, what is one thing that our government could do better to support what you guys are trying to do? It's a big question, and I know there's like probably a laundry list, but maybe if you can narrow it down to like a big pain point right now, or and we can come back to it again later, like if you think about it now, but then if you have another idea later. But go ahead.
Right now, in my line of work, they're trying to move to like, I can't even think, like electronic medical records, basically. So basically my notes would be able to be seen by anyone, which is highly dangerous because I work with people who are nurses and doctors, and not everyone needs to know specific. Now, if another physician contacted me that was working with a similar client of dealing with stuff, yes, that's okay, but I think this can put some information out there of your medical record that could be very hurtful to you in different settings. We all know you could get behind a computer, and if you could log into this, pull it up, and you could see, oh, Christina suffers from this, this, and this. That could skew the way of someone's thinking when they go into that room. So I think for me, it would be very hurtful.
So what do they need to do instead?
Shut it down. I would encourage, like, you know, patient care is probably the high thing that I look at. That's kind of where I'm at. So if a patient was like, Christina, can you send these records? Oh, I would love to send them. But I think having a thing that's open wide that anyone could get attached to is really hot. Like, that could be very detrimental to people in the professional setting that also work there too.
Down the line then. Well, backstory. Government comes from the Latin words gubernare, which means control, and mens, which is mind. Government literally translates as mind control. So we need to one, recognize the word itself and what that means, and then we also need to just look at the success rate without having to be on any side of any spectrum. At best, our government is wildly inefficient at doing good things. And so with that in mind, given the track record of the wellness industry and the health industry and the state of just American politics in general, centralized solutions aren't going to be the solution. So less the government is able to do anything, but it's more individuals need to start taking personal responsibility for their wellness and health, because ultimately we're the only ones that can care the most about our needs and advocate for ourselves. While we can find many professionals that are able to help guide us through that, we have to take the first step and take our own sovereignty and authority over our own well-being. And there are many solutions, there are many things available to any individual who is having health and wellness problems within their own self, within their body, within their own mind. But you have to take the first step. You are the only one that can truly start saving yourself and recognize that it's up to you. And after you recognize that and start on that journey, that's when the help will arrive. So, the government itself, ideally, please stay out of our way. We need to heal.
being able to support people when they need it, right? And so the reason that that isn't being done in our healthcare system is multifaceted. One area being compensation rates to providers from insurance companies. And so we have the doctors are going where the money is, and that means seeing more patients during a day for less time to try to make the ends meet. Providers can't afford to be independent providers anymore in many cases, so they're joining large hospital systems, and they are at the behest of what those systems and the insurance companies are telling them to do. And what all of this means for patients is less time for their providers to spend with them, and that means fewer needs being met. It also means there's fewer providers. We've got more providers that are going into specialty, high-paying specialty areas. Much of Oklahoma, for example, is a behavioral health care provider shortage area. It's also a primary care provider shortage area, meaning there's just not enough providers per the population or the people that need it. And so there's not just one thing that would need to be done to fix this, right? There's so much. You know, it has to do with how the insurance companies are doing what they're doing. It has to do with how much money our government is compensating doctors for providing Medicaid. I mean, many people don't know that most people that are in nursing homes, for example, are on Medicaid, right? Which is taxpayer-funded dollars. And so when those amounts are cut, care suffers. And then also these places don't have enough money to pay the number of caregivers, nurses' aides, to provide adequate care to the people under their care. So it all comes down to, the financial model, right, that's driving the number of caregivers in the workforce, and then the number of people willing to do the work to the extent where it's providing a quality care and quality of life to the people that they're trying to help. So, like I said, there's many layers to that, but there's an overview.
Okay. I feel like you guys now have comments based on what other people said. So, let's hear your opinions of what the other one said, and let's continue asking each other questions there, and then giving yours. Because the reason I also say this is I've in the last few years, I've dealt with several family members going through end of life. So one thing I do like about the medical records online is if my sister is going here, I can see all the stuff, and all the other doctors know the stuff. So there's that positive I see as a customer, but I understand not every single detail needs to be disclosed.
So I think there could be a great split in that, where they could do health records via
Or prescriptions.
or that, versus rather than actual information, right? Obviously I don't put every detail, client stated, no. I would never write a note like that, but I think it's important, there is, yes, medical field, but there is two separate parts, right? So
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, my brother-in-law is type 1 diabetic, so if we're on vacation, I would love for them to pull that up where they automatically know, okay, we need to check this first. But I think when you come to mental health records, it can be very fishy.
Yeah.
I know some of my nurses would hate for their physicians to know some of their mental health things. I totally agree with Stacy. There's a big realm of that, being a provider in a hospital setting. It's actually blessed me coming into my own private, but it is the insurance companies manage it, and it's kind of gross. And I know I've talked about going into private pay to get away from that, but then I don't know, I have this code of ethics personally, if I'm paying for something and you're a provider, you'd want to go to a provider that's under that. So it's a pool thing, professionally and personally, of what's a good balance. And I don't know, like you said, there's so many layers to it. I don't know how the onion would peel, to be honest. It's very gruesome to think about in both sides of it.
One thing that as advocates say to potential clients when they say, oh my goodness, insurance doesn't pay for your services, and we say, well, that's a good thing, right? Because we don't have your insurance company isn't going to tell me how much time I can spend with you or anything like that. And so I'm only answerable to that person I'm trying to help without those externalities, and the pressures of their insurance companies. And so that is an upside, but you're right, it is challenging. It does make it more challenging to have clients, in your case, patients. Some people have gone to flat fee pay models, as a way. So it's almost like a subscription service for your provider, right? You pay a monthly fee, and you talk to them up to a certain number of times or see them a certain number of times per month. And those have gotten popular, with some providers.
I do find it interesting, too, with the discussion around insurance and healthcare providers. There's, of course, an old story about a man who had broken his leg, and the people of the village couldn't figure out how to heal him. The doctor had come, his leg is healed, but he wasn't able to reintegrate into the village life. And eventually, a wandering sage came through the town, and he saw that this man was laying about his home. He wasn't able to tend his fields or to tend to the rest of his family or his previous businesses he was a part of. And so the sage told the rest of the villagers, give him a cow. And so now with the cow to take care of, he was able to get up every morning. He had something to get physical contact from, to brush, to take care of, to nourish himself with the milk from the cow. And he was able to start becoming and relating again to everyone else in the village. So my curiosity as well is always, we have all of these pre-prescribed ways of how to heal or how to be well, but what are the avenues that we as entrepreneurs can take on to provide other people those alternatives that the general institutions and systems that we've been raised in wouldn't think of? Like, what is each of our cow that would actually help us relate to the village again?
Well, and that's a good segue into a question from the audience here. Hope I don't mess it up, but as entrepreneurs, what recommendations do you each have for us? Because a lot of entrepreneurs don't have insurance, and how can we take care of ourselves and deal with our stress? Did I get it right?
Are you talking about health insurance specifically?
Correct. Yeah.
Or just de-stressing, just tips for de-stressing too.
Well, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. We need to start proactively looking at what our bodies are telling us, what our minds are telling us, and actually addressing those issues first. Because we then have to change, how do we look at sickness? How do we look at disease? If a person is sick, is it really the person that's sick? Or is it the environment that they're in that is going to cause sickness regardless? Because if you're not waking up every morning in a big city and you're not taking 10 minutes to breathe deeply and actually fill your body with oxygen and just let your mind empty of all the stress in your life, stress is the #1 killer of everything. When you look at Dr. Gabor Mate's research, he shows that chronic illness also derives from a lack of personal boundaries. How are we making sure to keep up on those boundaries? How are we making sure that we're actually protecting our own hearts and minds from everything that's being projected at us? What are we choosing on a daily basis to feed ourselves, not only nutritionally, but mentally? If we're scrolling on social media of any form or variety, are you curating that to where you are actually making sure you are making healthy mental decisions for what you consume on a daily basis? So a lot of this reaches back to less what can we do and how can we do it. It's more looking at what's the actual level of health that we can start taking those preventative measures. That's always where I start at the problem. If somebody comes in for a tarot reading and they're asking, is my boyfriend going to leave me? Or what do I need to do with my career or my job? I always bring it back to them. Those might be good stories to tell a little later, but what is the story of your own values? And most people haven't even worked those out. They have no North Stars by which to actually gauge what is healthy or unhealthy for them because they're so worried about the externalities. So most of the time it ends up being about 30 minutes or so of just throwing down cards to help them figure out what they value. So I'm curious what you guys think.
I think stress is like, we throw it around like dirty underwear, but we don't like dig into it. And so kind of like Nolan said, like what is it in your mind body? Because I think there's a lot, just a woman like just left my office and was like, you were totally right. I felt it in my shoulder, like the stressful week was in my shoulder. And so there's tons of different coping skills with it when we feel it in our body, right? So yoga, stretching. I like the tennis ball where I carry mine in my shoulders, I put my tennis ball, I lay on the ground, I roll around on it with the good pain, not the hurt pain. But when it comes to stress, I think it's so easy to say, but we're not diving in. It's like stress by. So I think if we could dive in a little bit more of like whether it's environmental, situational, at our job, and how we can manage that. So like you said, setting healthy boundaries. I think we always think boundaries are with other people, but also we have boundaries internally of ourselves. Like how do I shut that door when I leave my work every day so that I'm not carrying all my clients' stress around? Or how do you practice your coping methods daily so that you're not, when that stress comes, it's not like, what do I do? So whether that's 4 square breathing or roller coaster breathing, or if it's doing a meditation or relaxation or yoga, or I like to go to the gym, whether it's punching a punching bag. I don't care how you get the energy out. I think it's what are you doing with the stress? Because many of us just say I'm stressed, but there's nothing that goes on behind that. And that's where I see a big problem coming in to my office is like, Christina, I'm so stressed. Well, what are you doing about it? I came here. Okay, well, but what are you doing about it, right?
Right.
So I think that's a big thing, like especially in our society. And I say we throw it around like underwear because I think it's very common in our lives. So people say it a lot, you hear it a lot, but you don't hear the follow-up. And so that's where I try to always challenge people in having that following up to understand what it really is. And when you start to notice it in your body, you catch it earlier. So it's like, okay, what are you telling me? What is this stress telling me? Is it telling me I need to slow down? Do I need to pay attention in one area? Do I just need to maybe grieve or whatever it could be at that moment? So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome.
Well, so boundaries, responsibility for self, and being proactive and active participant in your own well-being. We are not programmed to take in all of the stimuli that we are taking in every day. And this is an opinion. This isn't, anything I'm trained. I'm not a psychologist. But I think we all can come away from a day's news, and feel overwhelmed. And the amount of information that's pouring at us from internet, TV, and newspapers, and just news, date myself, newspapers, news, okay? It can be overwhelming, right? Even movies, right? Any violence in movies. If you're looking at something just because it's on the screen in front of you, just because you've chosen to watch that movie, doesn't mean that you have to sit there and watch every horrendous act that they have built into that movie. Personally, I choose when to look away because there are some things I don't need to see. My psyche doesn't need those. And I think that can be extrapolated to other areas of our lives, right? Of knowing when to put that news feed down, knowing when to look away from that movie, knowing when to hit mute. That can apply to overall to us. And I think those are some active steps that we can take to set boundaries. That's boundary setting. That's a form of boundary setting by limiting the stuff that's coming into our psyches, into our spaces, to help us just try to be mentally more healthy. And unfortunately, it means expending energy on guarding ourselves a little bit, right? But that's boundary setting. That's knowing when we say enough. So I like that y'all hit on those words of responsibility and boundaries. And if people are feeling overwhelmed each day, I think, stopping and seeing what kind of your triggers are. Like, were you okay until something or until something else? And then once you can kind of zero in on that, figure out how can I change that, or why am I feeling so sensitive to that, and why is it such a stressor, and one thing at a time try to start peeling it back. Because in these professions that we are in, we hear a lot you know, and we're sympathetic, compassionate helpers, and so we must have an ability to walk away. And it can be difficult sometimes, but evidently we've found some strategies that work. So take from this what you can.
Well, I'm not specifically on the panel, but I have a couple of things that I would like to add to that question. As an entrepreneur who is an entrepreneuraholic, I think post-COVID, we have a real opportunity here to like stop telling ourselves this hustle and grind mentality, because it's literally killing us. So I think realizing what we actually need versus what we want, and really trying to distinguish those two things so that we can create time, because time's the scarcest commodity we actually have. We have to purposely create time to work on the things that we are impassioned about, that we are that are in our heart. As creators, entrepreneurs that are creators, we all are creators, we're visionaries, but we get sucked into certain aspects of things that are, the energy sucks. So that's where I feel as an entrepreneur, the boundaries need to exist and understand. Well, also, like, realistic goals. Do I have to get it done this week, or can it be done in 2 months? What does my life look like then? And that's the hustle and grind. Setting more, like allowing ourselves more time to get deadlines. And I was the one that was like, we're getting it done this week. So I think that's really important. I would like to throw out, because like you said, stress is the underwear. I'm a fan of Wayne Dyer. So he said, the truth is that there's no actual stress or anxiety in the world. It is your thoughts that creates false beliefs. So it's, again, leading, like, what are we telling ourselves? I have to get this done by this day. I have to please this person. I have to get that done. Those are thoughts that are self-inflicted stress that show up as anxiety. So if we start changing how we talk to ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves, and set more realistic goals for ourselves, and kind of really understand what we truly need versus what society has said that is what we need, then I think we can start finding some balance. Thank you for that question.
I totally agree with that last part too. Like, we feed our brains with a lot of cognitive distortions that we don't even realize. I think Aaron Beck and David Burns show a good, with the CBT model, the 16 cognitive distortions of like that just thought process. But once you understand like one's just discounting the positive or something like that, once you see it and you're like, oh, I'm doing it. So, but that is very true. A thought process feeds many different directions. And one thing about Stacy too, she said, kind of know your triggers. I always ask people, did you eat and how well did you sleep? Because it seems like those two things really encourage mood and behavior, because if they're not getting met, we're not fully functioning.
Yeah, no, the angry and did you eat, I like the HALT model of, you don't speak or do or make decisions if you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. It's a HALT. If any of those things are true, just stop. You take care of those things, and then you can address the situation a little bit better. But
Good tool.
what I find interesting, especially around the responsibility and the stress and the anxiety, I like an author, Bayo Akomolafe. He takes responsibility and splits it into 2 words: response, ability. Because sometimes our stressors are completely out of our control, and we have to retool our expectations of what we're actually able to do in a situation. So as an entrepreneur, if you say that, oh, I have to get XYZ done, well, then ask the question, could I have budgeted to outsource this thing or this problem? Could I have delegated this better? Could I have understood what the actual needs of my business are right now for the scale that I'm at, thus reducing the stress? So it's always good to ask, whenever we take responsibility for something, say our own stress or our own boundaries, what is our actual responsibility to deal with those things?
And I think that's one of the things that I didn't mention. As an advocate, what we're doing is we are managing expectations. We are helping our clients manage expectations. We're not performing magic, right? We're not making things happen. We are enabling in a good way, right? Communication. But we're also managing our clients' expectations for what they're trying to achieve, and kind of bringing in, through communication and through exploring the resources and their situation, kind of in some cases, a reality check, right? Like, so here is the reality of the situation. We've explored, we've asked the questions, we've gotten the information. Here's the story. Here's what you have to deal with. And so we can help them kind of recalibrate their expectations toward that healthcare situation, and then formulate an approach and a plan and move forward.
Very good. I'm going to switch the question gears because I feel like we could all just talk about this forever. Super passionate about it. All right, so I'm going to give a little extra preface on this question. So let's use the mental wellness as an example. Leading into COVID, for example, we were just barely scratching the surface of making mental health a socially acceptable thing we could talk about. And then COVID accelerated that tremendously. So with that kind of thing in mind, give us some perspective of the current biases that we still have, that you experience in your lane, that we need to work on to continue evolving. Because we have funded mental health now in ways that we did not do before. So we had to get over those biases that made mental health like this thing that was for other people that was bad. So what do we need? What are the biases that you experience in your lanes? Like death is a big one. Are we keeping people alive too long? What about like assisted suicides or, whatever, when people get to a terminal point? I mean, we have this whole thing that we have to be immortal. That's, is that really managing the thing the correct way? So death is a big one. Obviously metaphysics is a big one. So what you specifically are aware of in those lanes for biases?
I mean, mine was pretty hit on COVID, right? So I started my business in 2019, I think. So I kind of lived through that COVID thing. But I think I still see stuff today, like populations are a big difference, right? So that generational gap of like people, I thought people just sit on a couch and just talk. And it's like, so it's kind of funny, especially where I come from. Rural Oklahoma is very ignorant to mental health. And so I think this new switch of people understanding, like, actually these people do work to help people grow and learn, has really progressed in our field. I don't see any huge biases so much now, I guess. Well, maybe in like certain communities, like the LGBTQ queer community, there's a lot of, I think, in the therapy realm, especially being in a Bible Belt, you'll see therapists that just treat, like, they'll have more Christian aspects to their types of therapy and stuff like that. So I think maybe in a smaller realm it affects. My office is not like that. We treat everyone unless we're not capable in that area, so of what they're coming in for treatment. But I think maybe that would probably be where I would see some of the biases coming in, but nothing as it used to be of like, oh, you're going to a shrink? Nothing like that. However, do I still get comments? Yes, of just things that I've learned to not argue with. Like, if someone has a vision, it's their lack of knowledge, not my due diligence always to teach them or educate them on, but I could only meet them where they are. So if they already have that like thought process that, oh, people just sit on your couch, then it's kind of like, are they going to see the big picture of what therapy is? Because oftentimes either they don't want to hear it or they already have their vision set. So that's kind of where we are.
Interject into that. One area where there is some bias is
Ooh.
a friend who has been in business longer than I was. Probably, actually it might be still like 17 years. They are leaving their job in May because they spent 2 weeks in a facility last year and their clearance review is coming up, and they know they're going to lose their job if they do that clearance review. So to me, it should be more of a where the investigators go to the therapist and ask the question and get the legitimate answers. Because probably, but for most people, it's going to be, yeah, they're fine. They just need some, they just need to talk to somebody or whatever. They're not suicidal, they're not a danger to others, so on and so forth. And so you're losing good employees within the federal government, within the contractor world, that sort of thing, because you can't get clearances if they have checked that box.
Because they were proactive in trying to take care of their mental health.
Well, and just for the recording's sake, should I paraphrase the question? Okay.
I mean, I don't disagree. There's not much that I could do about that, right? Like, I can't even I'm like so protective of my information, like, unless I have like a signed document and have a client in my office, I'm like, this place is wanting this information, what do you feel? And I even go over those, but I think, I don't know exactly where this person works or whatever.
Well, it's any government employee or
Security
We're
clearance.
seeing some
It's
of
the
those
federal
changes with like the military, right? So there has been more changes in that arena. So do I think that arena might, I don't know.
I feel the form needs to be updated.
for sure.
Well, I feel like people need to be educated. So to me, they're not educated to understand why people need mental health. Because mental health it might not even have to be due to your job. It could be like you had 3 deaths and now your son got cancer, and so you're trying to like manage this as well as working, and you just mentally and emotionally are exhausted. So
Regarding that form, so for one thing, if you don't check the box and in their investigation they find out that you have had treatment, and then you will not get your clearance because you lie on a federal form. So the other thing is, it's not the main reason for them considering it a risk is because you become compromised as an individual in the eyes of the enemy. So someone could threaten to expose your treatment or whatever, and get you to betray government secrets. That's where they're approaching it from. They're not approaching it from
Your ability to be blackmailed.
right. Can this person be blackmailed? And they're just not willing to take the risk, especially in light of a number of the leaks and cases and whatnot in the last decade or so. That's kind of the main thing, is that they want to make sure you're not a liability in that regard. So that's why they.
well, I think Nolan hit on what government means, and so like a fine line of that information being like point. I mean, I know that stings for your friend, and I mean, I would ask that person, what are all your options? Can you go to your supervisor? Can you pull in, like, I've been here 10, 20, how many ever years, or something like that? I mean, that's all that I could be able to provide that person, but that goes back to the lack of education and the lack of unknowingness. And let's be honest, how often does the government change? We don't see that come around very often.
Every 4 years.
Right?
That's
but
why we're
like,
in a perpetual loop.
It just like, when it comes to things like that, it just doesn't, I mean, everything takes forever. Even when I see military people, like the reimbursement, I saw some that was on federal pay and I didn't get reimbursed till a year later. So it's just like, I hope there'll be changes in the future. That's all I can say.
I do have a question for you, Stacy, regarding that question. So if we take the fact that corporations are somehow people and that government policies act as individual entities, how would you coach a corporation or a government policy like that through an end-of-life transition? How would you treat that policy or those people who are in charge of those policies and coach them through, hey, this needs to change, this is inevitable? What do you do about that?
Well, that's a changing it to our corporate stance from a human is different. Well, interesting. What I'm a big fan of is called legacy planning, and that applies to institutions as well as companies as well as individuals. And so it's taking stock of your life, right? Taking stock of this company, what worked? Taking stock of your business, what works? Taking stock of your life, who have I been? What do I want to leave? And how do I want to organize this for the future? And I think I can see overlaps in whether you're doing that for a person, a company, or a larger institution. Comes back down to communication, right? Getting organized around who you've been, taking stock, and then getting organized for moving forward and letting the old fall back and just getting organized for the future. I mean, that's quite a general answer, but it's really, I think, a necessary approach for all.
And so what difficulties do clients have with that legacy planning? Say that there's still a degree of denial around the inevitable change. How do you coach them through recognizing that this just has to happen regardless?
So are you talking about death, imminent death? So the situations that I can find myself in are people seeking help from me as an advocate, and as I get to know them and realizing how very sick that they are, and having the difficult conversation about what has your doctor talked to you about, and realizing that no one in that person's medical sphere has ever mentioned death or how really sick they are, and that these next, whether it's 6 months or 2 years, could be a rather endless progression of procedures and treatments that don't actually help their quality of life, but just their length of life, right? So sometimes I'm the very first person that just kind of says those words, and helps that person start the conversation with their doctor. And then that comes back to making that educated choice for self, right? Once they realize that this progression isn't going to add quality, but it's going to add time, then they can make that choice about how they want to spend their time. Do I want to spend it, in hospitalizations and surgeries and all of these things, right? Or do I want to start pulling all my photos together and having family gatherings and putting my plans in order and thinking about my house and my home and just getting my life in order and getting ready to pass. And so some people choose, they want that length of time no matter what, right? They're willing to go through those procedures and anything, feeling like they will manage to get some kind of quality. As long as they have time, they'll pull any kind of quality they can out of that. Other people will say, no, what matters to me is I want to feel good. I want to be able to, whatever quality means to them, right? I want to be able to walk or talk or, play video game, whatever. Everybody's quality of life, it's subjective. And so, did I answer your question?
You did, and when
Okay.
we extend the metaphor, I think that's a perfect answer as well. We have to decide what exactly we want during any transition.
It's subjective. Quality of life is subjective. And so myself, trying not to be judgmental, right? About what, if I don't think, if I wouldn't do that, trying not to say, be judgmental if they choose a different path.
Which I find interesting too. You work primarily with the end-of-life transitionary period. What I find interesting, as well as most people don't have any concrete transition periods in the interim from birth to then grave. And I find one of the issues that I've had in my life is I've had to do so many different types of initiations or adventures or projects to try and tell myself and my own well-being that I've finally done something, I've made it to another level.
Mm-hmm.
But when most people that are growing up nowadays, we don't have very clear transition periods. When college is effectively high school 2.0, there's never a clear end to that childlike mindset into a new academic and scholarly mindset. There's no transition from boyhood to manhood given the state of gender relations. There's really no transition for when someone becomes an adult versus a child anymore. So I'm really curious how you would apply some of your own transitionary methods and techniques to people that are going through things now, in the present.
I don't know if I can apply those any specific ones from my work. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is it's more subjective these days, just like going to school is subjective, depending on what state you live in, and whether being schooled at home versus in a public school counts, right? So many areas of our lives have become subjective in how we define them, whether it's gender, whether it's education, whether it's the word rich or poor, whether it's mentally healthy or mentally ill, right? These are all spectrums, and the subjectivity can be applied along that spectrum. I mean, I think maybe the answer is there are not those clearly defined areas. It's just things have changed.
No, that makes perfect sense.
All right. Is there anybody else that has any questions? We're getting close to our time, so I want to make sure we have a chance for anybody else. Cool. Did you guys have any final words? I know we kind of the biases conversation kind of got halted. So if you want to speak to that or have any other closing words, then to sum it up.
I have a few more words on the bias, the mental health bias, and I saw something on my way here this morning, and it really struck me. And I actually brought a tear to my eye, and I was like, well, I don't know if there's going to be a chance for me to speak to this or not, but it kind of ties into the mental health and mental illness and the high-profile cases of violence that we see in the news involving our law enforcement officers. And in this state, we've implemented nationally the 988 number. It used to be the suicide hotline. Now it's a wellness number, you can call it. And now they will dispatch mental health providers, and when appropriate, with officers. Right? That's a huge thing, because before we were having a lot of officers respond to mental health calls. And there's, as we've seen in the news, a number of ways that could go wrong. So on my way driving here, I just noticed there was a woman. She was kind of sitting over on a kind of a sign, like those church have brick marquee kind of signs, and she was sitting there, and I noticed there was a man in front of her, and he was down on one knee, and that's what got my attention, because they were just kind of in a field, and I looked more closely. And that man was a police officer. And this was a white police officer and a black woman. And there was only one car near them, and it was a police car. And I was struck because I immediately thought he was trying to help her. And why did I think that? Because he was down on one knee. And it occurred to me, wow, what would this have looked like if he'd been, usually you see they're standing over the person. They're standing there, whether that person's standing or that person's sitting. And anytime a law enforcement officer is standing over somebody, you think they're in trouble. But just the fact that I saw him on one knee, I immediately thought, he's trying to help her. And it just kind of struck me that my brain went to, how do you know he was trying to help her? And then I started thinking about that, how I would have thought about that situation had he been standing. That kind of speaks to some bias. And so I wanted to share that story and the way that just my brain interpreted it, and then I had to take that other step to think about why I was interpreting it that way. So I think I can kind of close there. I think Vicki had wanted to speak a little to death denial in society, and maybe I'll close on that. Being an end-of-life doula, even some end-of-life doulas don't like the term death doula, because death, that word, right, death. What is the one thing everybody in the world has in common? Every single person, What is the one thing, no matter what continent we live on, where we live, what is the one thing we have in common? We're going to die. And yet we, in society, we have gotten away from death being part of life, you know, being accepted as a progression, a stage, right? Instead, we're taught to fear it, run from it, spend lots of money to avoid it, you know. And there is another way. And some people, you're not going to change their mindset. You know, however, because of what we watch or how we're raised or our culture, you know, it is to us what it is. But for some of us, we can choose to change that perspective for ourselves or the people around us through just allowing it to, and thinking about it more as a part of life and something that we can plan for and think about, and thinking about it and planning for it doesn't make it come any faster, right? But it can maybe absolve us of some of that stressful thinking about it. And again, planning so that we are in control. That's one of the scary things about death and dying, right? No control. No control over the pain or when it happens, or, you know, what about my house and my kids and my pets? And, you know, there's a lot of stressful things around the concept of death, and planning and talking about it, and just, you know, being around like-minded people, like doulas or, you know, things like that, might help people have a different mindset and feel a little more comfortable than having to be fearful about it. So.
And do you want to speak to this next year, that what we're going to be doing? Well, we got recorded here.
Well, there is a nonprofit called Death Cafe, and it exists for this reason, to help normalize the conversation around death. It's in many states. It's a nonprofit, and what it is, it's people like me and Vicki who are going to be launching one here in the new year, and it's just a safe space for people to come together. There's no, you know, not always a presentation or anything like that, but to come and just talk about things related to death.
And it's not for grieving.
No, it's not
it's
yeah.
about planning and having curiosities. You know, what are we wondering? What are we curious about? Or dealing with someone that is going through? How do we help? Things like that.
Planning in terms of how you're going to handle it, or planning in terms of like what are the options for burial in the United States?
Yes, that's definitely it.
Yes to all of those, right? It's intended, the Death Cafe model is intended for open-ended questions and for not an agenda. And so what we will be deciding is if we're going to follow the Death Cafe model, which has those very specifics. You can't have a meeting with an agenda. It's just for open-ended conversations. If we decide we want to do more topical type of sessions, then we'll veer away from that particular model. But the point is, we will start hosting these events for people who can come and talk. And if people have specific questions and things they want addressed, then we can learn more about it. We can talk about it. We can Google it together. We can go away and Google it and come back and talk about it. It's just really meant to be a forum for normalizing the conversation around death and dying for the reasons that I already spoke about.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right, Nolan, wrap us up.
Okay. Well, for the things we can't plan for, we can define art as the ability to derive meaning from the present moment. In amidst all of this chaos that we have, we need to be able to see the beauty, be free enough to see the beauty, and be honest enough with ourselves to tell whatever story is presenting itself before us. And we also need to make sure to leave ourselves with the story of, regardless of if we're told that we're just spinning on a rock in an uncaring universe, I have a different story for you. Each of us is made of starlight and sunshine and ocean waves. Act like it.
Thank you. And where can people come and get your services for right now?
Ooh, for right now, you can go ahead and see me at Craig's Emporium on 23rd and Clawson from 5 to 7 most Thursdays. And I will be launching a website here before the end of the quarter at nolanclayrogers.com.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.